Hey, Ashley here with another quick tabletop hobbies video. Decided to spend my quarantine time trying to catch up on some painting. I wanted to try out some more with the Citadel contrast paints over some zenithal highlighting. So I went with decided to paint up my Blood Bowl team. I've got the Skaven Blight Scramblers here. And this is all pretty new to me, so most of this is just experimenting and not necessarily the best thing to do. But what I went ahead and did is I used an airbrush and I primed with this Panzer Gray, and then I did a mid-tone, mixed these two together to get a slightly lighter gray than this one, and then I went over it with Wraithbone. Something that I should have done is, since I went with Wraithbone as my highlight color, which is more of a warm, there's a possibility that maybe I should have taken my mid-tone as like a brownish orange, and then maybe even done like a dark brown over this primer just to make it all warm. But I was worried with how the colors that I picked, a good chunk of the colors that I picked, my color scheme, are more gray tone. Is that the right term? As opposed to warm tone, but at the same time their skin is also warm tone, so I don't know, I'm not really sure what the right choice there was. Another thing to note with the zenithal highlighting of these guys and the contrast paints, I was worried that the way I typically zenithal highlight, there's steeper, darker to lighter, but these contrast paints really only work over real light surfaces, so I tried to lighten them up all together, so there's not a really dark tone to them. It's more on the lighter side, but then at the same time I'm kind of worried that it's still too dark. But this is the result of my zenithal highlighting. Just look at a couple of them here. So not a whole lot of contrast there, and there's a chance that it just doesn't really work out very well overall, but we'll see how it goes. So as far as my color scheme, this is what I went with here. I decided to do black on like the clothy parts, I'll show you here in a second. Purple as my, like over the more armored parts. Green as the kind of the splash, the bright splash. For the skin color, I went with Golem Flesh, the fur, Gorgonta fur, the teeth and claws, went with Skeleton Horde, tails, voluptuous pink, and then any little extra little strappies just did inside Gore Brown. And then I decided to make all the metal bits tin, this kind of darker tin color, though I eventually plan on, and I'm contemplating going over them either with highlight them with a brass, or maybe even kind of dry brush some silver over it. I haven't really quite decided yet where I'm going with that, but and I've painted up the majority team. Let's just have these three left, just as the base coat of these colors over the zenithal highlighting, so we can see how that turned out. Okay, so here are the 9 of the 12 that I've painted up with basically just one base coat of the contrast paints and then the tin metallic paint. Overall, it looks pretty good. Couple things to note. I really liked how the green and pink worked out. I think they, as a contrast paint, worked pretty well. And then as well as the Golem Flesh and the Gorgonta fur. The purple was probably my least favorite of the contrast paints. I think it's just really highly pigmented and it does not kind of spread out very well or show the contrast underneath it too well. And then I had similar problems with the black, which is actually more of a gray. you have to put on multiple coats to get it closer to a black color, and then at that point you lose your contrast. So overall, I think it turned out pretty well. Obviously, these contrast paints work better over highly textured areas, as well as instead of, or as opposed to flat plains, like the fur and the tails, you'll see more of the contrast doing what it's supposed to do. But then when you get to the flat areas like the shoulder pads, you're more prone to the pulling. And I'm sure that there's probably a better way to apply it so it doesn't do that so badly, but I didn't really figure it out. But once I start adding in details and stuff, I think I can clean it up a little bit. As far as like with the zenithal highlighting, it kind of worked in some areas, in some cases. In other areas it didn't work as well. I think that it probably would have been a smoother transition if I had stuck to all cold or all warm paints. So like this guy, for example, most of him is just the skin tones, which is normally a warm paint. Where there's a lot of wraithbone, it looks really good. But when you start transitioning down, you get less wraithbone and more of the mid-tone gray colors. It loses a lot, it's darker, it loses a lot of its pigmentation, and I don't think that it shines through. Sorry, it's not focusing, doesn't shine through as well. So I think that would have looked better if I'd done like a mid-tone brown colors, warm colors. But other than that, overall it worked pretty well. And I guess also it got really hard in some areas to even get, the darker it was, to get the color to even show through. So you look on the bottom of that hand, fill focus, you really can't see the pigment of the paint coming through because it's just too dark. It's overriding the color. So yeah, that's kind of what happened. So yeah, I do think that if you do the zenithal priming, you really have to make it really light and overall, and then maybe also just kind of stick to but just warm or gray. Although I don't know, in my experience so far, these contrast paints tend to work better over wraithbone than gray seer, but that might just be my opinion. Just get a little closer look at some of these guys. I'll focus up. Yeah, you can see how there's a lot of streaking on this cloak. I had to put multiple layers to try to fix it, and then I lost my contrast, and it just didn't really work out too well with that cloak. But I really like the tail. Some of these guys here. You can see again where under the arm there, the flesh just didn't really pull through with those darker gray tones. But overall, I like it pretty well. I really do like the green and the pink. And I think as I add more detail to it, it should hopefully pop out more. So we'll see how everything ends up. And here is just a quick look of my completed painted team, base coated anyways, before I start attempting to put a little more detail on these guys. Hopefully I won't screw them up too badly. And there you have it. Okay, so here's a quick update of my progress thus far. I have done an additional work on half the figures, and I've placed them to where you get the ones that I have done some work on the left, and then versus the right, which I haven't done any extra, it's just the base coating on there. So basically all I did is I edge highlighted mostly the purple and the black with a little bit of some of the green. Didn't touch the skin or the fur, and then I did some highlighting on the metallics. Just do like a quick little view, and y'all can let me know what you think. Again, I'm very new at this whole thing. I realize that it's kind of the more basic amateurish edge highlighting, as opposed to like a blending and all that, but I haven't quite learned that skill yet. But I kind of like it. At least it kind of gives a little bit more depth to like the purple and black. though I will acknowledge that it's a little bit sloppy on the edge highlighting. I don't have the steadiest of hands. Let's see if I can rotate it around. So you can see the backs of these. So I just did a little bit of work on them, and y'all can let me know what you think about it. See if you think the edge highlighting makes it look better or worse. All right, and then show the paints that I used. Got positioned back out. I used these. So the Slanesh gray to highlight the purple, the moot green for the green, and then just this neutral gray for the black. And then I highlighted the tin with the bronze, and then on a couple of the like kind of more weapons, I did a little bit of a dry brush of the gunmetal, and I put some of the null knot oil on some of the metallic areas as well. So like you can see this guy here, a little gunmetal towards the end, and then just, you know, some highlighting of the bronzy tin areas. And like the little runner dude. But yeah, that's what I did. That's what I've done so far. And y'all can let me know what you think, and I'll go ahead and do the other half up like that and show y'all the end result. All right, and here is the finished product. I have the 12 Skaven that came in the one Blood Bowl Skaven Blood Bowl box sitting here on the Skaven game board. And we'll take a closer look at those in a minute. To finish them out, I used the little decals that came with them to put the numbers and what they are on there. At some point, I might try to fit on some of the little symbols, but I don't want it to look too busy. Hadn't figured out which ones I would want to go with, but for now, I think it looks good as it is. For the basing, I used the Astro Granite, and then I went over it kind of in a splotchy pattern with the black Templar contrast, and did some splotchy dry brushing of the Stormvermin fur, the Bane Blade Brown, the Ogryn Camo, and the Sky Gray. Basically, I was just kind of trying to mimic the concrete of this road on the Skaven board. And then to represent the cracks of Warpstone, I just used the Warp Lightning in the Moot Gray. I tried to, since the Warp Lightning's pretty liquidy wet, I tried to kind of wet blend them a little bit. It worked somewhat. This is my first attempt at wet blending, so I think it turned out pretty well. Some of them looks a little better than others. Like, I think that's a better example of wet blending than this one next to it. But overall, I think it looks pretty good. Things that, excuse me, that I might add at some point. As you can see on this board, there's like blood splatters and stuff. So I may at some point add some of this blood for the Blood God technical stuff on the basing and maybe splattered on a weapon or a fist or something. Hadn't made up my mind. And again, I might add some of these decals. Let me go ahead and just show these figures a little bit better here for a second. Overall, I like how it turned out. I obviously have a lot to learn to improve on my skills. I had mentioned previously how my edging isn't the best, so my hands are a little shaky, so it's not the most fine lines. And then eventually obviously be best to make it more of a smoother highlighting shadowing highlighting transition with like wet blending and stuff like that, but I'll hopefully figure it out at some point. I'm just turning it around so y'all can see what they look like from behind. So yeah, if I added any more decals, I'd probably put them on maybe the back of one of these shoulders of these linemen. Not really sure where I could fit one in on the blitzers. Here's the little gutter runners. And then the throwers. So overall, I'm pretty pleased with the result. Hopefully y'all liked this video. If you have any further questions or recommendations, comments in general, please feel free to comment below. Hope y'all like, subscribe, and share.